I want to find out. It looks like the system we chose in relation to the oil sector gives us a lot of room to find the loopholes and to plug them. And I'll say that one of them is the discussion on GNPC and a loan that was taken from GNPC, $50 million, for which till today government hasn't paid. In 2018, the finance minister said, look, we're supposed to be having a cap. And once we drew the cap to some 25%, that loan makes up for the cap that we have put on revenues that is supposed to come to you. So it no longer becomes a loan. How does GNPC develop if things like this continue to happen? And where are we with this kind of discussion?
I think the case of GNPC is particularly sad, and I believe we need a national conversation on the GNPC we want as a people, and that should inform the kind of governance regime we put in place at GNPC. But I believe, even before the conversation begins, that most Ghanaians would want a GNPC that is able to fend for itself and return some dividends to the state. And GNPC will not be the first company, nationally owned company, that will be paying dividends to the state. We've heard about Daily Graphic sometimes paying dividends to the state. We have SIC, we have Goyle and other enterprises, GCB. These are all state-owned enterprises that do not depend on the budget.
That's right.
They go fend for themselves and return some dividends to the state. So going forward, I think that is the way we should be looking at GNPC.
But the whole conversation, this conversation is supposed to come into full flesh by 2026. GNPC is supposed to be on its own by 2026. And so some will say, why are we in a hurry to jump the gun when this is already supposed to be there? My concern is this loan should be paid back.
Wow. Who is the owner of GNPC?
Government.
And who took the money?
Government.
So that's it. And so until we get to the point where we treat GNPC purely as a commercial entity and find ways of insulating GNPC's management from governmental interference, we'll have to, I'm afraid, live with this. Properly speaking, I do not think that GNPC chief executive and top management should be appointed by the political authority. The same way the management of other state-owned enterprises are not directly appointed by the president. For instance, if you look at Graphic, the CEO of Graphic is appointed by the Media Commission and not by the president per se. And so we can learn from those type of arrangements and try to insulate. So for instance, whoever becomes the CEO of GNPC should be appointed through the Public Services Commission, given security of tenure and adequate insulation from governmental interference, and give him some standards or benchmarks, key performance indicators to meet, and that way it will be emboldened. He'll be emboldened to ensure that decisions that are taken are purely in line with business considerations. For now, we haven't come to that yet, so you can expect a lot of governmental interference and wastefulness in the way GNPC's affairs are managed.
Let me read this, and this was a PIAC report, I think 2017-2018. It says the 2019 semi-annual report for the Public Interest and Accountability Committee cited Tallow of having made a lodgement of $75 million into the account of the GRA instead of lodging the said amount to the Petroleum Holding Fund. What did this do to the Petroleum Holding Fund? Obviously, the money wasn't in there, but what does this mean?
What it means is that the monies that were mistakenly lodged in the GRA account would have formed part of the government's money, and therefore the share that goes through the budget, the annual budget funding amount. Because it wasn't paid into the Petroleum Holding Fund, but the GRA account, meant that for that period, government was deprived of access to this money for its development programs. For me, what was worrying about this development was not the fact that this mistake was made, but how it was treated when it was detected. So I recall that in some meetings with the GRA actually conceded that some error has been made, and that's this money, $75 million paid into their account. But then their problem was that they don't know how to reverse the transaction. And that for me was quite frightening, that monies have been mistakenly paid into your account, but you don't know how to refund the money back to where it should go. And so
that's strange.
Yeah, it was to me too. But subsequently, following several engagement with GRA, eventually they managed to return the money, but they returned it without interest. So if this money had been invested, of course, we'd have gotten some interest out of it. But we understand that, well, it's state-to-state transaction, so we can overlook that for now. But going forward, we want to ensure that mechanisms are put in place to forestall a reoccurrence of this type of mislodgement. It's happened before, and I think this is the second or third time it's happening. GRA has given assurance that they will be constantly orienting the relevant desk officers at the IOCs, the international oil companies, so that they know where to pay what type of tax.
PIAC, even though they haven't had a prosecutory role all these years, have made a lot of inputs, and a lot of reforms have come as a result of some of the reports that have come out. Is it time for us to have a singular body that takes a look at mining and takes a look at the oil and gas sector, and possibly even the whole extractive sector, a body that has a supervisory role, prosecutory role, so that we really benefit from the revenues that come out of the extractive sector?
Yeah, that discussion is currently ongoing, and there have been some work done, led by the Honorable Deputy Minister for Finance, Honorable Kwat, I think he's in charge of revenue at the ministry, and Honorable Mohammed Amin Adam, Deputy Minister for Energy in charge of petroleum, and also the Ministry for Lands and Natural Resources. And in the various meetings, they have been represented by the technical advisor to the minister, Mr. Ayi, who used to be the CEO of the Minerals Commission some years back. Yeah, and so some work has been done. I happen to have been part of a small team that was created to craft such a legislation. So there's a draft bill which has been handed over to the ministries, the 3 ministries, to review and take them through the necessary processes.
So specifically, what does this draft bill say, or what does it address?
Well, basically, it is seeking to create a harmonized nomenclature for dealing with the transparency and accountability issues in both mining and oil, which means it may end up repealing the Public Interest and Accountability Committee from the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, and then recreating it under this new bill, and then giving it, the new PIAC, if you want to call it, an expanded mandate to ensure transparency and accountability in both oil and mining sectors.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And Dr. Steve Manteaw is the Vice Chair for GATE, that's been looking at the mining sector and some of the things that need to be done and reforms that have to go on for us to maximize on revenues and all other issues. Well, we've been taking a look at, after COVID-19 and everything settles, the need for us as a country to take a look at our free SHS program, the need for us to quickly take a look at having one statutory body that takes a look at the oil and gas sector and also the mining sector, and indeed some nitty-gritties and some ironing out that has to be done in the various PIAC reports that haven't been done to generate more revenue for this country. My name is Manteaw.